suspect Abdul Azidi. Earlier, a police boat was seen moving between Vauxhall and Chelsea bridges, with the Met Police saying they began that search just after low tide this morning around 9 a.m. The 35-year-old was last seen on CCTV leaning over the railings of Chelsea Bridge. For those watching on TV, you can see Azidi on the left-hand side of your screen, that figure there walking across the bridge just before 11:30 on the night of that attack in South London. Detectives say they now believe Azidi has died and that his body may never be found. A woman has today been charged with attempted murder after the suspected poisoning of two children, aged 9 and 13. Emergency services responded to the scene in East Sussex on Thursday evening after receiving calls of welfare concerns. All three were later taken to hospital for treatment, and appearing in court earlier, the 38-year-old woman was remanded in custody. We understand she'll appear again in court on the 8th of March. Authorities have said they believe it was an isolated incident with no further risk to the public. Pro-Palestine protesters in Birmingham have been removed from a Barclays Bank branch on the High Street after staging a sit-in. 7 people were seen lying down inside. You can see them there on your screens, waving flags and placards, reading "Stop the Genocide in Gaza." It's been reported that one man who was angered by the protests was seen banging on the glass doors of the bank building, although we understand no arrests were made. Meanwhile, 3 people have been killed after a car was hit by an airstrike in Gaza's southern city of Rafah. The Palestinians are claiming it was carried out by the Israeli military, and you can see there the aftermath of that attack, which happened earlier today. Medics say that a separate strike by Israel overnight also killed 17 other people in the same area. And the strike comes after Israel's Prime Minister announced a plan to evacuate civilians from the crowded southern Gazan city of Rafah, and he said to defeat the last Hamas fighters there. The US has said that it won't be supporting any further military action in the area without the guarantee, they say, of protection for civilians. Large parts of England are facing potential travel disruption and possible flooding as heavy rain hits. The Met Office has issued a yellow weather warning for rain, which covers Newcastle and surrounding areas, all the way down to East Anglia and along the east coast of England. It comes into force, or has come into force, in the last hour and will last until 12 p.m. on Sunday. There's also another weather warning covering much of Cornwall and Devon and Somerset. That's already been in place for the last 2 hours. The latest round of doctor strikes planned later this month could, we understand, be called off, according to the BMA, if, they say, NHS bosses give them more time for negotiations. The latest wave of walkouts were announced this week after the BMA said the government had failed to improve their pay offer. They're asking for a 35% pay rise, which the government has rejected. Under the current plans, thousands of medics will strike in England for 5 days from the 24th of February to the 28th of February. And I just want to bring you a quick line that we're hearing from Wales. A pilot has been airlifted to hospital after a plane was seen to crash into a garden in Anglesey. You can see here on the screen, it's hard to make out, but what appears to be 2 parts of the wing, those yellow sections in the centre of the screen for those watching on TV. Witnesses say they saw the small plane nosedive, spinning mid-air before it disappeared out of sight. And one witness who lives next door to the crash site said that he heard what sounded like engine malfunctions. Police say officers, the fire service and paramedics were all in attendance at the scene of that crash this afternoon. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome to the Saturday Night Showdown. Now, the alleged Clapham acid attacker, or alkali attacker if you're a chemistry nerd, is hopefully being eaten by crabs somewhere in the Thames estuary right now. The suspect, Abdul Azidi, an asylum seeker who apparently saved up for the chemicals by cutting his own hair with a bread knife, shouldn't have been in the country in the first place. He failed 2 attempts at claiming asylum and was convicted of sex offences. So who's to blame for this alleged chemical attacker being in the country and free to destroy the lives of women and children? You might think it could be evil people smuggling gangs or maybe organised Islamic terrorism. But no, It was church leaders in this country who helped him to claim asylum. Abdul was granted leave to remain in the UK after a priest vouched for his conversion, arguing that he was wholly committed to his new religion of Christianity. And Abdul Yazidi is far from the only person they've helped. Thousands of men from Islamic countries have claimed asylum in the UK after converting to Christianity with the assistance of Christian clergymen. Their argument goes that they can't be sent back to whatever Islamic country they've come from, or they'll be killed. They also pretend to be gay for similar reasons to claim asylum. Speaking to Alison Pearson in The Telegraph, a whistleblowing Reverend Matthew Firth speaks of a conveyor belt. When I arrived, lots of adult baptisms were already booked in, which was highly unusual. The vast majority, if not all of them, were asylum seekers who had already failed in their initial application for asylum. Clearly, if you were rejected, the next step was to book in for baptism. He speaks of what appear to be professional photographers taking pictures of the new Christians for their Facebook profiles so they can show the Home Office. We're used to seeing people pretend to be Christian to get into church schools, but this isn't some well-meaning atheists who want a better start for their children. This is fighting-age men from barbaric medieval cultures gaming the system to stay in the UK when they have no intention of actually converting. And it's not the first time it's led to tragedy. The Liverpool maternity hospital suicide bomber Imad al-Swalmin was a supposed Christian convert whose behaviour was nonetheless more Abu Hamza than Vicar of Dibley. There's even a word for it in Islam. Taqiyya is the action of committing a sinful act, such as pretending to be Christian, for a pious goal, such as spreading Islam or murdering infidels. So, why are Christian churches complicit in this? Why is it being done? Well, our churches aren't guided by the Word of God anymore. They subscribe to a new faith, the religion of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This new faith says that diversity is always a strength, whiteness is something to be abolished, and the nation-state of Britain is a colonial power that must be destroyed and remade in the style of a university prospectus cover. At the top of the church, Archbishop Rowan Williams calls for open borders, although he himself has very secure borders around his residences. And his foot soldiers help men like Abdul Yazidi into the country, oblivious to the danger they present to women or the danger they present to Christianity itself. Richard Lionheart, the last good Christian leader, must be spinning in his grave. Christian leaders defend their support for open borders by saying, "What would Jesus do?" As if Jesus would wave every Tom, Dick and Adbull through the border. I don't know if any Christians have noticed this, but heaven has a pretty strict entry policy. There's a guy called St. Peter, and he stands there with a holy clipboard like an elite nightclub doorman, ticking off all your sins and looking into your soul. And if you're not good enough, no heaven for you. If God ran our asylum system, it would be much stricter. I think it's time for our Christian leaders to take note of that. As the victim of Abdul Yazidi's sex attack said, who in their right mind thought that it was a good idea for the church to give him a reference when he was on the sex offenders register? The world is a mess. He's a danger to women. That's obvious to everyone, but sadly, not our church leaders. I'm joined tonight by brilliant and insightful political commentator Reem Ibrahim from the Institute of Economic Affairs. And he's wise, he's entertaining, he's broadcaster and lawyer Andrew Eborn.
Aye.
And also, our resident nutrition expert and star of the least erotic calendar ever, Lewis Schaefer. Now, Andrew, I'm going to start with you.
Yes, go for it.
You've got a legal background. So, I mean, do you think some of the people who help asylum seekers and then go on to commit crimes or terrorist atrocities could be held culpable? We've seen...
Put in that way, in your brilliant opening monologue. It's so obvious, isn't it? The reality is this, however. What they're saying is that if you're genuinely Christian and you're sent back, you're going to suffer prejudice and possibly death. Yeah. So you've got to look at is the system right, first of all, and secondly, people who've abused the system. Now, in this particular case, they say, look, actually, all the evidence suggests that there was no way he was really a convert. He still surrounded himself with his buddies and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So it seems as though it's an abuse of the system. Yeah. So that's your first question. If it's a legitimate case, case, then absolutely make sure they're protected. This doesn't seem to be that case, and anybody looking at it, it's so obvious.
Yeah.
But what you need to do to make sure you convert the public is to say, look, these are the rules. If you turn around and say, do we need to change the rules, or is this an abuse? In this case, it sounds as though it's an abuse.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a clear abuse, Reem. I mean, and people are now using the sort of mechanism of pretending to be Christian or pretending to be gay to claim asylum when, you know, their original claim fails.
Absolutely, and this just begs the question, how many other horrendous, treacherous human beings are walking freely in the United Kingdom as a result of gaming the system by pretending to be Christian? Now, you could always say, look, you know, the Church of England, I'm not actually sure if it was the Church of England that gave him this reference.
Not in this specific case.
But I'm sure they have in the past. But the point of the matter is that actually, you know, the Church of England, Christianity was supposed to have open, tolerant values, and I think those things are fantastic. How horrendous is it that these people are taking advantage of good Christian values?
Yeah, but we can't expect people to be good. I mean, Lewis, you know this as much as anyone. You can't expect people to be good. People are going to exploit loopholes. They're going to game the system for their own benefit.
I love that comment, by the way. You know this as good as anybody. Nasty boy at the end.
Because I gamed the system. I pretended to be in love with my wife.
Oh, there you go.
And, that's not true. I was always in love with my wife. But you pretend. You've got to pretend. It's so shocking, these people. Andrew and Nareem is like, the rules. We got to follow the rules. They're good English rules. This is what you're not following the rules. It's not cricket. Those days are long past. They're liars. The Church of England are liars. And why don't people just get used to it? It's like all of our, it's not my institution, but all the institutions of state have proven to not be, they don't care about this country.
Yeah.
They take their marching orders from...
So you make a really good point, Lewis, but let's put it this way, plays devil's advocate.
Yeah.
If he were genuinely a Christian and sent back to his country where he came from, and he were genuine, they turned around and said, you're Christian, we're going to kill you, would that be fair?
You know what? The fact is that we know that he was lying.
No, I get that.
Fair.
But would that be fair?
You know what? It would be fair. It
to
would
kill
be
him.
fair. Because
to kill him.
Yes.
Well, it wouldn't be us. It wouldn't.
It would be another state, another foreign government doing it, which, by the way, doesn't happen often. I mean, Christians aren't hugely persecuted. I'm half Egyptian. In Egypt, Orthodox Christians have historically been persecuted. Again, it depends on the country, depends on where they're going to. Ultimately, if you game the system and you lie, you should have absolutely no right to return to this country at all.
Yeah,
but how do you know?
I think the problem is that our asylum system is just too liberal in the first place. Why are these people even being allowed to cross the channel in the first place? Why was he allowed 3 appeals? This is ridiculous.
And it seems like the asylum system just helps the people who can game it, the people who are the least vulnerable, the people who have the wealth and resources to pay people smugglers, whereas the people who really need to help, I mean, dare I say, women and children. I don't understand why it's so many men, claiming asylum, and the women and children are staying behind to face the persecution.
I think the problem is our language. You're sitting here saying, I don't understand, but you totally understand.
I was being sarcastic.
People can't tell you're being sarcastic. Everybody knows. The fact is, I agree with you. They shouldn't be sent back to be killed. If there's a few of them or thousands of them, but there are millions of them. So at some point, this has nothing. The fact is they didn't send him back because he was a Christian and going to be killed. They didn't care. They knew he wasn't a Christian.
Right.
How many other people are in this country already as a result of our incredibly liberal, illegal migration system, effectively?
But there's a difference, though, as we say. The difference is, if we turn around and say, look, the rule is if you're genuinely Christian and you're going to suffer death, then that's OK. You shouldn't be sent back. But if you're not and you're abusing the system, then it's very clear we all agree on that. Is that fair?
I think the point is it's very difficult to assess any of these things.
It's not difficult to assess.
How can you
cut people in half and look for the cross?
Well,
I think that's a good idea.
Are you going to check people for being gay?
It'd be interesting. You can get the evidence and you turn around and...
Evidence? What evidence?
No, because what happens...
I have homosexual feelings. What is the evidence?
This particular case, he surrounded himself... all of the evidence suggested that he hadn't converted.
Yeah.
OK? So if that's the case, that's what you look at.
He'd been baptised.
It's an abuse of the system, and I think that's the reality.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Reem. I think the asylum system is too liberal. It needs to be tightened up for the sake of genuine asylum seekers as much as anyone else. Coming up, we will assess the week's winners and losers in Cursed or Blessed. This week we've got Joe Biden, the countryside, which is racist apparently, and the steroid Olympics. And we'll show you what happened when this possibly drunk guy decided to try and stand on an egg. Don't go anywhere.
Tony going to stand on an egg.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, you know, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, the community jogging group Park Run have been caught up in a trans row, with women runners no longer having their times published on the organisation's website. It's time to end the war on real women. In My Take at 10, Prince Harry spends just half an hour with his cancer-stricken dad and no meeting with his brother. He might be rich after the books and TV shows, but the young prince has paid the ultimate price. We're live from 9.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Cursed or Blessed is coming up, but first, I promised I would show you what happened when that bloke stood on the egg.
Tony going to stand on an egg.
For anyone listening on radio, it didn't go quite as planned. He tried to stand on the egg, but somehow managed to do a half a somersault and smash the egg into the floor with his face. Reem, have you ever tried to stand on an egg after a few drinks?
I've not quite tried to stand on an egg. I've tried to stand on a few other things, but I won't specify the details.
Okay. I'm scared to ask. It's time now for Cursed or Blessed. Me and my brilliant panel will look at 3 big stories and decide who are the week's winners and who are the losers. Now then, he's American, he's aging, and he's prone to embarrassing gaffes and memory lapses. His popularity is rapidly declining as the general public turns against him. Yeah, it's not easy being comedian Lewis Schaefer.
Wow. How can people turn on me? Look at how great I look, let's be honest.
You look amazing. I'd actually have more confidence in you as the next American president. And yeah, speaking of him, across the pond, President Joe Biden has been defending his record. The president insisted his memory is totally fine, although his argument was slightly undermined by the fact that he had just called Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi the leader of Mexico. Let's have a listen.
As you know, initially, the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. My memory is not good. My memory is fine. My memory, take a look at what I've done since I become president. None of you thought I could pass any of the things I got passed. How'd that happen? You know, I guess I just forgot what was going on.
Now, Lewis, you're American. I've got to ask, what's the word on the street in the Bronx?
Yo quiero cerveza. That's the Bronx. Anyway.
But Joe Biden, I mean, he's declined. For a while now, he's looked not the full shilling.
Yeah.
But now he seems to be entering a period of rapid decline. I mean, every time I see him, it's like watching an advert for a donkey sanctuary. I'm just like, man, just let this guy have some peace. Why is he running for another 4 years? He's clearly, doing well if he's going to make it to the end of next week.
Yeah, well, because Kamala Harris, his replacement, is even worse. And that's why. And the second thing is, he's not pulling the strings. He's the puppet. He's not even the puppet. He's there just signing the pieces of paper. His wife, Dr. Jill Biden, is running it, or Barack Obama, or it's directly from Team World. So they're happy.
But surely there's other people in Team World. There's other Democrats that they could say, listen, Joe, why don't you sit this one out?
Yeah.
And we'll bring in, I don't know, Gavin Newsom.
Well, it would be Kamala, wouldn't it? That's how it works. If Joe Biden was to step down, Kamala would be president, which I agree. That's even worse.
But does it have to be Kamala?
It doesn't have to be. Well,
No,
it
it
doesn't have to.
does.
They can choose the different people. Do you know who the president of Mexico is?
I don't actually.
There you go. So poor old Joe Biden.
But I do know who Sisi is.
Obrador, his name is Andres Obrador, I think, if you pronounce it correctly. Yeah. But that's the interesting thing.
The only important Latin American president is Javier Milei, the free speech libertarian advocate. He's the only one that's important in Latin America.
Yes. What I love about Joe Biden, which he should run on, is in this divided world that we have at the moment, his name is an anagram of be joined. And I think that's what he should run on, and I think he's work on that sort of basis.
But I mean, Andrew, you must see that he's the biggest gift to Trump.
Without a doubt, but Trump is his own gift, isn't he? I mean, he is glorious. He gets more column inches than anybody, and he's the only guy I know. The more you throw at him, the more his popularity increases. You could have all the charges in the world, and what's better than that? He tells people, I'm going to be charged, and they're going to throw all this stuff at me, and his fans just get more and more adamant that he's going to be the next messiah.
It's because Trump comes across as this kind of anti-establishment figure, even though he really isn't anti-establishment. He kind of comes across that way, and I kind of get it. I mean, I get why the appeal is there. This is the thing with Trump.
He's like, if I get in, I'm going to do all this stuff. And it's like, you had 4 years. Why didn't you do it in 2016?
Well, to be fair, I think people going to the election booth this year in the US are going to be thinking, hold on, do I feel economically better off now or at the beginning of Joe Biden's presidency? And I think they're going to say they felt better off at the end of Trump's presidency.
It was interesting because everybody wrote Trump off. I predicted he was going to win a couple of times ago. When everyone went to bed, if you remember about the Clinton thing, they went to bed thinking that Hillary had won, and they woke up and there's Donald. Extraordinary. It's going to happen again, so don't run. If he's allowed to run, that's an interesting one legally.
Well, he could also run from prison. That would be interesting.
Oh, no, he can, but they're trying at the moment whether he even gets on the ballot. So that's the discussion at the moment. But if he does, don't be surprised if he manages to...
I think he's the next
president. Biden would be a gift.
I think Reem is wrong, because it doesn't matter whether people are better off than they were 4 years ago. What they're thinking is, how can we destroy the country fast enough? And that's what the Democrats are thinking. They're not thinking about that. They're basically selfless people. And
I mean, the American people. The American people are going to be thinking, do I feel better off now or 4 years ago? You had the lockdowns, you had COVID, you had the pandemic, you had huge, rampant inflation, huge public spending.
The lockdown started under Trump.
It did, and it continued under Joe Biden's presidency. And I think they're going to be thinking about that.
Pocketbooks as much as everybody. The Democrats are thinking what is morally right for the future. They don't care about the destruction of their own lives. They're very generous, loving people.
Yeah, well, it's also great great that they've updated the map of the Middle East to actually put Mexico in the right place.
Next to Egypt.
Rightfully is, yeah.
New neighbours.
Replacing Egypt. There it is, right next to Israel and the Gaza Strip. In case, I mean, a lot of Americans would actually believe that. Anyway, next up, speaking of maps, we've got the countryside. Yet the poor old countryside is accused of being racist on an almost daily basis these days. And this week, a charity group called the Wildlife and Countryside Link put the Wellington boot in, saying the countryside is a racist and colonial white space. Exactly right. A tree called me a Scottish scumbag just the other day. This seems ridiculous. The countryside can't be racist. It's just trees and stuff.
Of course it's ridiculous, and of course it's really stupid. I mean, I really don't understand first of all, who are funding all these ridiculous charities that come up with all of this nonsense?
I've got a feeling the taxpayer is racist.
Well, indeed, actually, we see a lot of these kind of ridiculous charities that are being funded by the taxpayer secretly by some kind of government scheme and some kind of government spending.
Well, yeah, in fact, the Wildlife and Countryside Link is sort of a group of charities, 72 charities, including the National Trust. So I think the problem is this religion of diversity, equity and inclusion is insidiously seeped through every institution.
It's also incredibly damaging to ethnic minorities. I mean, people in this country that genuinely are ethnic minorities and look at this stuff and think, oh my God, this is absolutely ridiculous. And it's making us look like idiots. We don't believe this stuff. We don't believe that trees can be racist or the countryside is racist. Honestly, I mean, I think that the conclusion that it came to was that effectively not many ethnic minorities end up going to the countryside. Yeah, because they live in cities majority of the time. Like, it's obvious why this is the case, and I think calling it racist is so damaging.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andrew, I get the feeling that the supply of racism isn't keeping up with the demand, so people need racism to get outraged by. They're just making up racism.
It's the thing to bandy around, isn't it? It's what I said last time. Abraham Lincoln used to say, if you call the tail of a dog a leg, how many legs does a dog have?
5.
5? See? And that's why Abraham Lincoln, then he's still only got 4. Because whatever you call the tail, it's still a tail. So just slapping around the racist word on people doesn't make them racist. We need to stop. It's an absolute nonsense, and we should call out this nonsense, which you always do on this show. Which
Very good of you too.
We certainly shouldn't be funding it with taxpayers' money. This is where I get furious, because all these equity, diversity and inclusion officers are all getting paid for
fortune.
The public purse.
But the reason why this is happening is because anything that white people enjoy, they want to they call racist.
Yeah.
So it's very simple. So it's not like the countryside. It's just like the white people enjoy this. It must be racist.
Well, next up, it's Silicon Valley billionaire Peter Thiel. Thiel's latest brainwave is to put some of his ample cash reserves behind what is being described as the Olympics on steroids. Because it literally is the Olympics on steroids. For years, athletes who took performance-enhancing drugs were considered disgraceful cheats and the lowest of the low. But to Thiel and his mates, they're honourable pioneers. They're going to start the enhanced games, where athletes will be encouraged to take all manner of performance-enhancing drugs. They say it'll push research in nutritional supplements, but I think we all know the real reason is it'll make crazy entertainment. Now, Lewis, your body is a temple, and I read a lot about how there can actually be therapeutic uses for steroids or for testosterone and things that are considered performance-enhancing drugs. Do you think this is dangerous, encouraging athletes to take drugs, or do you think it's just going to be a lot of fun?
I think it's going to be like the gladiator thing. It's going to be very entertaining. But the fact is, all those people who take drugs to improve their bodies wind up dying. All the YouTube people, the number of these bodybuilders, they're all dead.
Oh, liven up! I think it's going to be great.
And let me say something else. And the second thing is that exercise kills. No one should be exercising.
Do you think the dangerous
stress, especially for women?
Do you think the dangerous thing in these drug-fueled Olympic Games isn't the drugs? It's the actual exercise that they're doing.
I'm thinking the drugs are bad and the exercise is bad. And the fact is this guy Peter Thiel, all he cares about is paying a couple of £1 million or dollars to see rippling, young, flesh, pulsing muscles.
He could just buy your calendar.
He could buy my. Is exercise is wrong. They're pushing drugs. I
think it's excellent. I think first of all, I would legalise most drugs as a libertarian. I think that we should encourage people to take whatever drugs they want to. But ultimately,
I've seen so many lives destroyed by marijuana because it stops people filling in forms. It stops people being ambitious.
I think that ultimately the reason why we see people, well, also the smell. I think the reason why we see people abusing these drugs is because they're illegal. Actually, when we look at across the world, look at countries like Portugal or even the Netherlands, where these drugs are actually legal. I mean, it's a separate issue, but where these drugs are legal, they're more regulated, people have better care, and actually, you know, in Scotland, for example, we've got some of the highest deaths from drugs in Europe. So I really do think that we need to have a conversation about ending the war on drugs. But with this story, I think it's fantastic because we're encouraging people to have lots of fun. And I think what's going to be interesting is seeing what the maximum human potential really is.
Before their heart bursts.
Before the heart bursts.
Well,
it is extraordinary. The feel-good factor is what you'll call it. But what I love about there's two things in there. One is the drugs are wrong, and you're quite right to call that out. And there's quite an interesting thing they do. Like
why are drugs wrong?
For all sorts of reasons, we'll come on to in a bit. But the potted panto is quite funny.
Yeah.
If you look at the potted panto where people get basically drunk before doing things, I think that's quite funny. What we're also going to get now with My Baby is about AI and robotics. And we're going to get, it used to be the $6 million amount, it's now the $44 billion with Elon Musk. You can basically replace all parts of your body with all sorts of things where you can have somebody who's basically a cyborg running against that, which will be much better entertainment than people on performance-enhanced drugs.
Amazing. Well, next on the Saturday Night Showdown, Culture Corner, we will discuss the bizarre rise of the Dignify movement. It's like dignified with AI, and you'll understand it in a moment. And Suki Hannah will explain why a rapper is not a musician. Plus, more fun with eggs. I'll show you what happened when these guys decided to try and fry an egg on a car bonnet.
I've always wanted to try this. Being the hottest day, probably going to just fall off.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria DiPiero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you, and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
22.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Culture Corner is coming up in a bit, but first I promised I would show you what happened when those dudes thought it would be smart to try and fry an egg on their car bonnet. I wonder if it worked out.
I've always wanted to try this. And today, being the hottest day, it's probably going to just fall off.
For anybody listening on the radio, that egg just disappeared down the side of the car. I'm not sure where it is. I'm not sure if it's cooked. Andrew, I've heard of people cooking in strange places. Like, apparently you can cook fish in the dishwasher.
You can, and wonderful fish it is too. Obviously, go to Las Vegas, you can fry eggs on the pavement and things like that. It is incredibly good. I've never seen that. It obviously clearly wasn't hot enough.
Have you ever cooked anything?
I've tried all sorts of things. Yes,
a slice of pizza on a travel
You can try. I get people to do that, absolutely. It's
Fun fact, so when I was younger, my mum used to put egg yolks in my hair because it's got the protein, it's good for your hair.
Right.
But when I put hot water on it, it would cook, so I had scrambled eggs in my hair.
Scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs in the hair. Delicious.
OK, well, let's see how you voted in my Twitter poll tonight. I asked, should church policy on conversion to Christianity be reviewed in the wake of the chemical attacks? 95.1% of you say yes, review it, and just 4.9% say no.
So it's close, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, that's a margin a military dictator would settle for in a rigged election. That's amazing. Anyway, Culture Corner now, and we are going to start with the Dignify, however you pronounce it.
Easy for you to
Sounds like
say.
Old MacDonald had a farm. These characters comb the web for pictures of scantily clad women. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I'll be doing it in the break. And then they use AI to dignify the woman by putting her in modest clothes and sometimes with a child. And women are furious. It seems the only thing they hate more than being sexually objectified is not being sexually objectified. The pictures sometimes give the impression of going back in time. Will outdoor toilets be next to make a comeback? Well, I hope so. They put hairs on your chest. Let's go with chest. Anyway, if we're talking about important women's issues, there's only one place to turn. Lewis.
I think there's, first of all, you're dealing with women, and nothing makes them happy. So whatever it was
Not
that you
true.
said, whatever you want.
Absolutely not true. Sorry, have to butt in there for a second. This is not
women
true.
that I hang around with.
Reem, our women's expert, is talking. Please don't interrupt.
This AI thing, I didn't think there was anything to it. I barely understood it in the beginning because you reach a certain age and you don't understand this stuff.
Yeah.
But you can't believe anything. And this is the past few years where you realize you cannot believe.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, as you know, I do something called Fake or Fact, Andrew Eborn's Fake or Fact, where we look at AI, putting the AI into Britain, see what I did there. So the reality is that in 2017, fake news was the word, it's actually 2 words, of the year. Last year, it was AI.
Right.
You combine that and anything that you see now, in an election year, we're going to have more elections than there's ever been forever.
We could all be AI.
We will be. There can be lots of fake videos and fake audio recordings, this sort of stuff, and it can be used. I always said it's our greatest human achievement, but also our potential biggest existential threat.
Yeah.
And it depends on understanding that sort of stuff and what can be done with it. We're going to have lots of glorious videos coming out. We had Imran Khan just a couple of days ago giving an election victory speech, all created by AI.
Amazing.
We're going to have lots of this sort of stuff happening.
Reem, you're going to be happy because they haven't just used this to put clothes on women. They've also removed tattoos from social media dunces like the Island Brothers or Island Boys, whatever they're called. And they've even clothed a surprisingly sexy starfish from SpongeBob SquarePants. But, I mean, what do you make of the backlash?
No, I think what's interesting is, I'm again a libertarian. I think women should be able to dress as they wish if they want to. But I actually do think that, dressing more modestly is a pretty good thing to do, and I think we should be encouraging women to embrace modesty and embrace traditional values.
Yeah.
And actually, this AI seems to be doing God's work.
So you think it's sent from Jesus himself?
Yeah, I think God sent this AI down to earth and said, hold on, girls, put it away, and sent this AI, and now it's being covered up.
Do you think it's a Christian AI thing at the end?
Yeah,
I
definitely think the person behind it has to be, religious in some way.
But it's the backlash to what happened with Swiftie and things like that afterwards. So here we are, we've got a few of these.
And we've got a good example here. So this is a woman showing a lot of cleavage. I mean, geez, you could park a speedboat, and that is she's been covered up, and she looks attractive. It's just there's not quite as much flesh.
Just proof, girls, you don't have to show it all off in order to be beautiful. You can be very, very beautiful, and often are more beautiful when you leave it to mystery.
Yeah, absolutely. What a lovely sentiment. Next on Culture Corner, the rapper and reality star Suki Hana. Andrew Eborn is a massive fan.
I love it.
She's a musician, a TV star, a mogul, but don't expect her to do any magic tricks, whatever you do. Take a look at this.
I didn't know that about you.
What do you know?
That you're a musician. But that's why I'm interviewing you today, so I can get to know you.
So I'm a musician.
Mm-hmm.
What the that mean? Make magic or something? What is musician?
I think you're confusing that.
Yeah, I'm not no musician. I make music. I make music. And that's not all I do. I make music, I act. I'm a TV star too, a young mogul.
Just really quick, I think you're confusing.
I'm not confusing nothing because you don't know. You thought that all I was a magician or whatever you said.
Oh my God.
So she's clearly confused the word magician with musician. So the interviewer has assumed that she's, said that you're a musician. And I don't know, it's so funny. I don't know if it's a deliberate planned sketch to try and go viral, but I've got a feeling this might be authentic stupidity.
I think it probably is, but it would be very clever to sort of play this off and say, oh no, we did it for the views, it was for TikTok. I mean, you've got to be a bit stupid to think that, to mistake musician and magician. But also, what does she have against magicians? She seems to be like, oh, I'm not one of those. How dare you accuse me of magic? Like, no, I don't know why she's so offended.
Yeah, but most magicians are quite weird, aren't they?
I think, to be fair, thank you.
How did you do that?
to be fair to magicians, they always are confused. I'm a member of the Magic Circle.
Are you a magician?
I am a magician, and members of the Magic Circle, they often go and say, look, member of the Magic Circle, I'm a magician. They say, well, play us a tune. So to hear it reversed is interesting. It's like, I'm a comedian. Well, change colour then. They get the same principle on that sort of basis. So people are mishearing things.
Do it again. Do it again.
I will do it. It's got to be always a thrill.
You can only swallow one pack of cards.
Exactly.
Lewis, what do you make of this?
Well, I Googled her looking for music that she had made. I don't think she's made very much music. She's a rapper, and to her, when she says musician, she's thinking of someone who plays a musical instrument. So she's right. She just says, I'm not a musician. I'm a rapper. She's just sitting there just talking. And the truth is...
Yeah, I watched one of her songs. She talks about her sort of nether regions an awful lot.
Yeah, that could be considered magic.
I think she needs some of that dignify. Dignify.
Yeah, but the thing is, I'll tell you something about magicians. They are shameless because anyone who would call themselves a magician should know better not to do that. I have no respect.
Okay. Well, next on the Saturday Night Showdown, we've got a common story of everyday folk as a trans woman leaves her testicles in her ex-boyfriend's fridge and then sues him for throwing them away. Plus, I'll show you what happened when this guy celebrated a dramatic penalty miss.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not
eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's
So
sake,
basic-
civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes. Something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
Well, do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
So he is.
Welcome back to the Saturday Night Showdown. Frozen testicles coming up next, but first I promised I would show you what happened after that penalty miss. For anyone on radio, basically, the penalty missed it, hit off the bar, but then it bounced way up in the sky and managed to somehow bounce back in when the goalkeeper was celebrating. Anyway,
And while the kicker was just sitting there doing nothing, he could have acted appropriately.
I don't know, can you kick it again if it's a penalty like that?
Yes, you can, of course.
Really?
I don't understand football. Can someone explain the offside rule?
Well, they weren't offside in that one.
We don't have time. We don't have time for this sports. For this sports.
I'm just a lady.
Anyway, let's see what you've been saying about tonight's topics. Parm says, "Hello, GB News and Lewis." I don't know why it's singled out. I'd like to inform you that the UK nor any Western country gives aid to India. India rejects any aid and builds her own on her own feet as a sovereign, independent country. I'm not sure if that's completely true. I'm sure there are.
I think India does receive some international aid.
There's a little bit of a scandal about the fact that they've got a space program, but we're still giving
Never
them
let
aid.
the truth stand in the way of a good story, however.
Or an email.
No, exactly.
Linda says on Lewis. This is Lewis. You seem to be bringing the emails out today. At last, GB News has given him a decent spot on prime time. You won't regret it. Well, there's still 15 minutes to go.
You might regret it now.
And let's finish by taking a look at some of the more bizarre stories from around the world this week. We start in Michigan, and here's a sentence you just don't hear often enough. A biological male who identifies as a transgender Muslim woman has sued an ex-boyfriend for not returning their testicles from the fridge. Let's take a look.
And I thank God that these nuts were extracted and they were put into a biohazard bag. And for giggles, I put them in a mason jar and I put them in the fridge next to the eggs.
I mean, I've had some scary shared flats, and people have left, you know, some unpleasant things in the fridge, but never a mason jar with testicles in it.
I have to say, yes, you're out having a ball on that particular night. You're absolutely right. Next to the eggs was the important thing, because you're staggering around feeling for something to put on your bonnet. That's the moment you don't want, isn't it?
Oh, that's grim. And sorry, what transgender Muslim woman? I mean, a bit of an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's sort of like pick a lane with
pick
that.
A lane, like pick an oppression point. Do you know what I mean? You can't be oppressed on multiple angles. You've got to either be an ethnic minority or a Muslim or a transgender person or gay. You've got to pick one.
Although, ironically, in Iran, they have more transgender people per capita than anywhere in the world.
Well, it's because they like
California.
They like gay people transitioning because they don't like the homosexual couples, so they actually prefer it if you look like a a straight couple.
Yeah, it's basically if you're gay, then you're given the choice transition or face execution.
Yes, which is actually, I think also sometimes the state sponsors medical care for transitioners.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this story is just so bizarre, and I'm a little bit unsettled by it. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, Lewis, are you unsettled by it, or because you love your strange meat products?
Well, you know it's interesting where the egg right next to the testicle.
Yes,
you know, I'm surprised they weren't fertilized.
Oh, that's a good idea.
But the fact is, this is one of those only in Florida.
Yeah.
Does something like this happen?
Yeah.
Only in the US.
Well, last tonight.
Wait. You weren't.
Last tonight.
This was Michigan.
What?
It was Michigan.
Oh, was it?
That's what made it a joke. It was you're supposed to say Lewis, but that was in Michigan.
Well, there we go. We do regret it now, Linda, who sent in that email about us not regretting it. Popular Scandinavian airline Finnair has hit the headlines this week. They have decided to start weighing passengers as well as luggage. Apparently, such information can help with working out fuel efficiency.
Yes.
The weigh-ins are voluntary, and the airline says the weights will only be seen by one person managing the scales. Needless to say, not everyone's happy with some furious fatties typing out angry tweets with their pudgy little fingers, and it doesn't look like Weight Watchers are going to hold their next conference in Helsinki. Lewis, you used to be...
Fat. You used to be fat. And there's no shame.
Did you really?
Yeah, I did.
How did you lose the weight?
Through old-fashioned way of being miserable.
He
for
had
about
a
4
jar
months.
of testicles in his fridge.
I guess
Every time he was hungry.
So, yeah.
Well, there you
but,
go.
you know, there's no shame in being fat because this world is inundated with food.
Yeah.
And so it's impossible not to be fat. So the question is, people who are skinny should be embarrassed because you're the devil.
So skinny,
I would actually go further than this, Ed, and I would say, I mean, I think this is perfectly fine, just sort of being weighed if you voluntarily choose to. I would go further and say you should pay more if you weigh more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. And actually, you'll call it thin air. I like the idea of that. But also, you work on the base. If you go on a helicopter, exactly, they need to weigh you. And it's nonsense having a system where you weigh the luggage, but you don't weigh the person carrying the luggage. So you need to work on that basis. So it's a good rule, and it's a rule we should enforce.
Well, and it must be, if you're a skinny person, you're sitting there and you're like half a pound over in the suitcase, and then you look over and
you look over and you're 50 pounds over.
Some land whale there with a
It's not really fair. I want to be able to carry all my makeup without a fatty next to me, having to take up all the space.
And if you weigh a bit extra, you have a choice of how you can lower that weight. You can maybe have a diuretic or maybe have a circumcision.
You think they could have this actually at the departure gate?
At the thing, saying, you know, if you want to fly, you're going to have to lose a foot.
Get in the sauna suit. Get in the sauna suit. Take these performance-enhancing drugs.
I was making it more extreme than that for the sake of the joke.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Keep it next to the eggs in the fridge. Whatever you have locked off, I think that'd be appropriate.
OK, well, right. Up next is Mark Dolan tonight. What have you got for us this evening, Mark?
Should the taxpayers, Leo, be helping out Manchester United to build their new stadium? There's talk of this idea, the Wembley of the North, but should we be coughing up? Also, given the fact that his tax return has been released, is Rishi Sunak too rich to be Prime Minister? And why has Prince Harry only got half an hour for his cancer-stricken dad?
Sounds like a brilliant show. Well, thanks to my brilliant panel tonight, Reem Ibrahim, Andrew Eborn and Lewis Schaefer, and I'll see you again next week. And don't forget, headliners as well tonight at 11 p.m.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GBNews.